Like I said earlier, they actually had odds that, she was like third or fourth in the betting odds to be MVP of the WNBA. That's such a slap in the face to every WNBA player. It's unbelievable.
Revenge doesn't always roar or erupt in chaos. Sometimes it comes quietly through a single decision that shifts everything. For Caitlin Clark, retaliation wasn't about firing off posts online or confronting anyone in interviews. Her revenge was subtle yet devastating. She uttered just one word. No. No to Geno Auriemma. No to UConn's legacy. And no to the $1 million contract that returned years later. On paper, it seemed unthinkable turning down over $1 million for only 8 weeks of basketball. But this wasn't merely another proposal. It was a lifeline from the very man who had doubted her, dismissed her, and treated her like she'd never measure up. By saying no, Caitlin didn't just reject the money. She humbled the one who believed he could never be humbled.
That's the worst part about new fans. They have no perspective. There's no context. So they just say ridiculous nonsense.
This was never merely about stats, not the points, the assists, or even the trophies. It was about power. For years, Geno Auriemma held the keys to women's basketball. The man who decided who mattered, who received attention, and who faded into obscurity. But Caitlin Clark completely rewrote that story. She didn't chase his approval, his program, or his money. She built her own kingdom from scratch, independent of him. And when he eventually came knocking, she didn't need to raise her voice. Her silence spoke volumes. I don't need you. You need me. Every revenge tale starts with one fatal error. Geno's mistake wasn't a misstep on the court or a bad timeout. It was arrogance, blinding, unrestrained arrogance. Before Clark became the icon of women's basketball, before sold-out arenas and record TV ratings, she was just a dream-filled kid. Back then, UConn seemed like the coolest place on earth.
What does bother me is some of the people I deeply respect, their basketball credentials, their basketball history, their commitment to basketball and women's basketball, I think have really not covered themselves in glory with some of this commentary.
The dynasty, the empire, the home of Taurasi, Moore, and Stewart, the pinnacle of women's basketball. For a young girl growing up in Iowa, nothing seemed bigger than UConn. So when recruiting season arrived, the path appeared obvious. The most electrifying prospect of her generation teaming up with the greatest recruiter the sport had ever seen. But that phone call never came. Geno Auriemma didn't answer, didn't reach out to Caitlin Clark, and never contacted her parents. Only a vague note trickled through her. AAOU coach, from a man heralded as the master of recruiting. That silence carried meaning. And don't be mistaken, it wasn't accidental, it was intentional. The signal was unmistakable. She wasn't a priority. His reason? UConn already had Paige Buchers and he didn't want 2 point guards. On paper, that's reasonable. But what followed turned a slight into a humiliation. Geno argued that if Clark truly wanted to be a Husky, she should have called him herself. Consider that. The same coach who made a legend identifying once-in-a-generation talent decided Caitlin Clark wasn't worth the effort and then blamed a teenager for not chasing him. That wasn't merely a recruiting oversight, it was outright disrespect.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart.
It was a slight that lingers, the kind that never leaves your memory. Caitlin Clark didn't react with anger, she simply stored it away. If Geno Auriemma didn't believe in her, she would find a place that did. So, she picked Iowa, a program without UConn's prestige or legendary banners. To outsiders, it seemed like compromise. But to Clark, it meant liberation. At Iowa, she wasn't overshadowed by Paige Buchers. She wasn't a secondary thought in Geno's empire. She became the recruit, the focal point, the future, the centerpiece. Everything orbited. From the moment she touched the court in Iowa City, she changed the narrative. Those Logo 3 South weren't just points. They were declarations. Sold-out arenas weren't accidents. They were proof. And those record-breaking television numbers, they were evidence. Every bucket, every viral clip, every milestone shouted the same thing. You underestimated me. Meanwhile, Geno doubled down. Rather than humility, he clung to pride. He brushed her off with smug commentary, labeling her a kid playing in the driveway. What he failed to recognize, but everyone else already understood, is that ordinary players don't pack Madison Square Garden. Ordinary players don't propel the WNBA into mainstream culture. Caitlin Clark was anything but ordinary, and she ensured the world knew it. Interviewed
This kid's on the wrong team. She's got the wrong skill set to handle the physicality of that league, and she's a rookie.
And that's where the irony hits hardest. Geno Auriemma was the one who shut the door when Caitlin Clark came knocking. He thought she'd fade into the background, just another talented player who never quite made it. Instead, she went on to build the biggest empire women's basketball has ever seen, and she did it without him. When Geno finally came back around, contract in hand, Clark didn't lash out or celebrate. She didn't need to. She simply said one word: no. And that single word cost him more than any championship defeat ever could. But Geno couldn't let it go. Every time Caitlin's name surfaced, he found a way to drag her into another comparison with Paige. If Clark was fearless, he reminded everyone that Paige was too. If Clark connected with fans, he'd mention that Paige had done the same. It wasn't coincidence. It was calculated. By tying Clark's success to his own players, Geno kept himself in the story. He wanted people to believe her rise wasn't new, that it was just another reflection of the dynasty he created. But those subtle jabs started to backfire. The fans saw it. The analysts saw it. Even other coaches saw it, and they all realized Caitlin Clark didn't need Geno's name to shine. She'd already become bigger than his legacy.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart. There were actually odds on she's third or fourth in betting odds on being MVP of the WNBA. These people are so disrespectful and so unknowledgeable and so stupid that it gives women's basketball a bad name. Okay, so the kid was set up for failure right from the beginning.
And that's where the irony hits hardest. Geno Auriemma was the one who closed the door when Caitlin Clark came calling. He assumed she would vanish into obscurity, just another gifted player who would never fully rise. Instead, she went on to construct the largest empire women's basketball has ever witnessed, and she did it entirely without him. When Geno eventually returned, contract ready, Clark didn't lash out or gloat. She didn't have to. She simply uttered one word: no. That single syllable cost him more than any championship loss ever could. Yet Geno couldn't move on. Every time Caitlin's name appeared, he forced a comparison with Paige. If Clark displayed fearlessness, he reminded everyone Paige had too. If Clark engaged fans, he pointed out Paige had done the same. This wasn't coincidental. It was deliberate. By linking Clark's achievements to his own players, Geno ensured he stayed relevant. He wanted the world to think her success was preordained, just another extension of the dynasty he claimed to have built. But those veiled digs began to misfire. The fans noticed, analysts noticed, even other coaches took note. All realizing Caitlin Clark needed no association with Geno to stand tall, she had already outgrown his legacy, proving that her rise was entirely her own.